Hi, Rhea.
Hi, Apoorva.
What time is it in Dallas, by the way? You're drinking wine, I see.
It is currently 11:22 p.m. I will also say for all of the listeners that I was just telling Apoorva how I have not I haven't had a drink for like a few weeks until this weekend. And I mean, now we're recording a podcast at 11:22 p.m. So I thought a glass of wine would be nice to end my Sunday.
Feel like I need a glass of wine right now, considering the conversation we're getting into, but it is 9:53 a.m. on a Monday morning. So you're having that for me.
I mean, so I did, my friends and I had a picnic yesterday, and then we went to like one bar and had one drink. And the drink I had was an iced Mexican coffee. It was fantastic. But I mean, I guess you could start your day with an iced Mexican coffee.
You know what? I had my chai and I'm ready to spill some chai on this episode. So how do I even start this episode?
Well, I think that's a good question because I think I should start this episode. So today we decided to kind of do an impromptu round two of, I guess, the curveballs in your careers. The first one was about my curveballs and what my brain was going through. And this one is going to be about Apoorva's curveballs. And I am also going to learn what her brain is going through because we have not had the time to catch up.
No, I mean, guys, when I say that the past episode that we shot with Rhea on her curveball in her career was impromptu, it's the same right now. Like we were literally just catching up on how to strategize for the pod. And we were just like, she's like, what's been going on? And I'm like, holy crap, we have not had the chance to get on and catch up with each other. And we were like, this is the perfect setting to start another episode.
Well, with that being said, I mean, why don't you give an update about what is going on in your life?
Yeah, nothing glamorous. I've been I don't know if I've mentioned it on the previous episodes, but I quit my job. I must have mentioned that definitely,
Yeah.
but I quit my job back in November and we started the podcast in December. So my sole focus was on the pod until Jan. And as you know, 20 something year olds aren't really great when they don't have work on their hands. And we're also programmed to have a job and hustle hard. So I was kind of like going down that train of like, oh my gosh, I'm jobless. I just have the pod going for me. I have no idea what to do. So in Jan, I started applying. And trust me when I say Rhea's heard this excuse, it was not an excuse, but every single time I was like, I'm interviewing. And so I'm sure she must have been like, what the heck is going on? But trust me when I say I had nothing going for me until Feb because everyone knows the grind, right? Like you apply on LinkedIn, the stuff just, you reach out to HR, you reach out to recruiters and you're just like, hi, I need a job. What's going on? Nothing went for me until Feb. So until Feb was a dark time. And then suddenly I was interviewing for 5 jobs at once. And then in March, I was like down to a couple last interviews. And now I'm sitting in front of you guys with 3 job offers, which I want to say, I'm not bragging, but it's a big confidence booster knowing that it's been a struggle having to move to a new continent and readjusting. And now I'm sitting with 3 job offers. I've eliminated one, so I've been going back and forth between 2. But we are here to kind of like dissect that process and maybe give you some more tips, hopefully that you can associate with. And yeah, that's the long spiel about what's going on.
Love it. I actually want to go back to you talking about how many job offers you have because I think one thing that people often don't think about or realize is like when someone says something like that, like what was the behind the scenes that that person can sit there or is sitting there and being like, I have 3 job offers. And if anyone talked to Apoorva in like January or even like most February, it was kind of like shit. I don't know
I
what
don't
I
know
did
what
to
the heck is
myself.
going on. Yeah.
Like it was definitely a very difficult road. So I'm very proud of the fact that you're proud that you have 3 jobs, even they're all a little bit different. But I think sometimes it's hard to even be like, oh, if I didn't get like the perfect offer that I wanted exactly, like to even be happy about what you have.
Yeah. I think like the first, even without me getting into the weeds, guys, the first takeaway is there's no perfect job. And we've already said this before in the past. That is some notion that I have thrown down the toilet drain, flushed it down so hard, because both of us have spoken to you guys about how tough it was with our first jobs. And my biggest lesson moving into this process was there's not going to be a perfect job. I just need to see what aligns with my interests, which is a hard process. Like it took me, I'm still here. Right before this podcast recording, I was talking to Rhea and I was like, we were weighing out the pros and cons, and she was really good at playing devil's advocate. And I have to give an answer, again, following the trend of the previous Curveballs episode, by tonight. I want to say in like 6 hours, and I'm still dilly-dallying between both of my options. But I think to your question, go on.
No, I was going to say like, well, let's get into that actually. So like, what's going on in your head right now?
So one being, okay, like I have one job that's not remote. There's one job that's remote. Both of them are kind of like similar positions, but one is more niche and one is more 360. The one that's 360, like all round experience, is in the same industry that I was in before, versus the remote job is in a new industry and it's up and coming and it's a very India-centric brand. At the end of the day, both of the companies work with the same target market, which for your reference and for those who are wondering, I live in India right now. So that's India market. So very exciting. Regardless, a goal of mine when I moved back was to work with the Indian market and understand what that is. So if you are currently juggling between jobs, I would suggest go back to what your biggest goal is. Yeah. That's kind of been the trigger or like the guiding path for me.
Something we were actually just talking about was going to a new city and exploring something new also means taking a hefty sum out of your bank account versus a new job, and staying at home means taking a hefty sum into your bank account.
Yes.
So talk us through kind of like what's your balance between the two right now? Like what are your thoughts between each of them?
So I think, it depends on person to person. Personally, I've been very fortunate to not have the pressure of saving the money. It's been more about the experience for me. So what is it that gives me a more wholesome experience? But also, just to throw in another curveball, is when you're in India and you're in the business line, after like 2 or 3 years into your work, there is a natural pressure, even if it doesn't stem from you. This is a general industry trend, to do your master's. So if you are like 2 to 3 years into the whole cobweb of working, there's almost like every auntie, every uncle, every person in a job interview is like, so what's your 5-year plan? Are you planning to do your master's?
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's been lingering in my head, being like, okay, so I guess I have to start prepping for B school, because not only because I want to do it, sure, a part of it is what I want to do, but also because if I want to remain working in India, you just have a step up or a leg up in your professional life when you have a master's, which I understand isn't the case in the US. I've been there. It's more wholesome in the US. In India, it's boils down to the degrees at times, even though corporates say that's not the case. So yeah, like
corporate does a lot of things. That's not the case.
Trust me when I say that. Yeah. But, so kind of weighing in all of that, it's like, okay, sure, saving is not a problem for me at the moment, but does it make sense to save more right now? Because I want to do grad school in about 1.5 years from now. So yeah, those are the biggest players in my head, which is like, okay.
Well, let me throw another wrench into your thought process. Can you talk us through what your thoughts were when you applied for each job?
That's a good question. Nothing. So
you just blindly applied?
I mean, so this
application.
Yeah. So every person has a desperate moment in their life. And in that dark Jan or Feb period, I was just like, you know what? I need a confidence booster. And it's so sad, but it's real about how much a job kind of signifies your confidence in the society, right? Like Rhea, you went through this, right? When you told people you were an entrepreneur, we had this conversation about how do you even phrase it in a social setting? When I used to tell people in Jan and Feb, I run a podcast, people were like, oh, that's a side hustle. What's your long-term plan with it? I'm like, bro, like that's what I'm doing right now. But I went on LinkedIn. I did what most people do when they're desperate for jobs, went onto the search bar and said, marketing strategy manager, 2 years plus experience, go. And every job, I think it's true when people say that they apply for 50 odd jobs or 60 odd jobs before they get that stroke of luck. But I did basically that, just kept random, easy apply on LinkedIn, reached out to all my network groups, lots of people who, it also, I think a curveball here is to note that I moved back to India. So my connections are as fresh as someone who just graduated out of college, right? So I never studied here. So my friend group and my group of connections are all based abroad. So having to restart that whole, this is where networking comes in, kind of just literally networking through LinkedIn, leveraging the fact that I have foreign experience, reaching out to people meticulously, updating my resume meticulously for every job I applied to. Cover letters make a difference. So I wrote friggin' cover letters for hundreds of jobs.
I did not. I was like,
well,
I can't do that.
Well, that's the difference, right? For Rhea, when we spoke to her about her curveball, she had literally an opportunity present itself, right? Because of all of the past work she's done, but the foundation to that was also networking, was because you kept up. You kept a relationship with your ex bosses and counterparts, right? So for me, it was just more like, I'm a fresh grad. Imagine you just need a new job and you have experience and you want to rebuild a base. It's very different when you move to a country and you already have a job. So I was doing that, and funnily enough, one LinkedIn, I want to call it DM, but it's not a DM, but a LinkedIn kind of, I slid into someone's LinkedIn connects and I said, hey, like, I think your profile's super cool. Wow. When I say DMs, this whole example sounds so wrong. It's like I'm trying to get set up.
I mean, I feel like LinkedIn could technically be considered DMs. Like I've had people slide into my LinkedIn DMs trying to sell me things, whether for like both of my, I guess, current jobs. So like, it's a thing. People slide into your DMs. We can go on with it. It's a new term.
Yeah, it's sliding into your LinkedIn DMs.
It was added with a wink for anyone who was listening to it. It is LinkedIn DMs with a wink. So next time you use someone's LinkedIn DMs, also let us know.
Yes. Yeah. So just hit up a manager, and I was like, I'm looking for a job. I didn't actually, guys, let me take that back. Rule number one of LinkedIn, and we all know this, but when you reach out to potential people on LinkedIn, you never ask them for a job directly. So you say, oh, I'm really interested in this company and I'm super excited I find your career journey very inspiring.
Really?
Yeah. I did that, and he was like, sure, let's get on call. This was 3 months of just meticulously networking on LinkedIn. And finally, for the first time, someone in India said, let's have a chat. And then he was like, I'm hiring for my team. And one thing led to another. So that was one of them. Pretty much from there on, there was no turning back, because every opportunity I got after was not from LinkedIn. It was just because some connection was like, it's hiring season, we need someone. And we know you've been trying to, you told me 3 months ago you were looking for a job. Are you still looking for a job? So I think, when we talk about the behind the scenes process, Rhea, like this is something that is so important to note, because there's a build up to it for people who do not have opportunities that present to them, or even if they did have opportunities present to themselves, it's because of that homework and networking we did in the past. So yeah,
I think that's something that's also very significant, because when you're in a job, you don't do that because you're so preoccupied
Yeah.
by that job. And I mean, in an ideal world, you stay within that position or that company. But in a realistic world, you don't. Things happen. Layoffs happen, the world changes, whatever, you get a new boss, there's tons of things. But I think that really touches on the importance of keeping that network ongoingly sharp, and so much easier said than done. I've said that I was going to post on LinkedIn since January. It is now April for anyone who's counting, and I still have not posted on LinkedIn. My job has changed, but I have not posted.
This bitch, like when we launched Pod after 21, I went on to LinkedIn because I'm a super LinkedIn gal. Like I hate posting on LinkedIn, but I kind of have to because I write blogs and now we have a podcast, so I want to promote it. But like I was like, Rhea and I started a podcast after 21. Hit the link in the bio. And this chick, I told her that I wrote like a whole LinkedIn post. She never liked it.
I did. I thought I liked it.
No, you didn't comment on it or like it.
Okay. LinkedIn gives me anxiety.
I get it.
I've never announced to the LinkedIn community that I started Katoy.
No,
or the marketing agency.
I think everybody, if you're listening to this episode, we should, like this. Does that even make sense? Like this episode on YouTube, because we want, the more likes we get, that's an incentive for Rhea to post about
everything that is going on. I don't know. I think there's like maybe I'm making this up in my head, but I feel like there's a stigma about like posting on LinkedIn, like Instagram,
bragging rights.
Like one is bragging rights, but two, it's like it's an older generation, or like it's not just people of a certain age and younger, so it feels like you should be more like prim and proper, but that's a discussion for another day. Going back to you, let's talk a little bit more about these two positions. So I think one thing we were also talking about is like, so if her goal is a master's, like what job sets you up better for your master's degree? And so like, let's talk about it. Like job A, what are you thinking is good? And are you thinking for like, one, is it just like what will help me get into a master's school? Or are you also thinking what will help me form the basis of a good master's education?
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter over like, obviously you want to get into a good master's school, but personally, like you can approach this question two ways. Like if you're someone who is very much after what's on your resume and how you want to look after you go to a fancy company, go to a fancy school, sure, you can do that. But if one thing I've learned from my past experience is like your experience matters, originality matters. I can be a cookie cutter person right out of a consulting job, going to the best MBA school, and then boom, I have another consulting job, or I'm like a strategy head at a corporate job, which I don't think is for me. I've had a very unconventional path. Saying so, I'm looking for a corporate job, so I don't know how much of a cookie cutter person that makes me. But I think personally, when I'm looking at masters, I want to see approach this two ways, right? Like something that speaks to a part of my identity. So I'm an athlete, so it makes sense that I work in a specific industry because that is something I am passionate about. So when you look at it from a master's point of view, you're like, okay, there's a story to this person. It makes sense. But I also want to play devil's advocate, and I want to say, the more you emphasize on your story, or the more you're chasing the bigger brands because it builds your story, the more cookie cutter you get. Does that make sense? Because like,
totally.
I don't know, like I'm going back and forth here, but clearly you can sense how confused I am, because I feel like the more I force a path for myself, I hate it. I'm that person.
To give you an unsolicited piece of advice,
please.
Not advice, I think it's more of just like a different viewpoint. So I knew I always wanted to work in fashion. Not always, I think. Actually, that's a lie. I always knew. I thought I wanted to do marketing, and then it came back into fashion merchandising, best of both worlds. But I very specifically went to college for fashion merchandising because I wanted to graduate and I wanted to work in fashion. Like that was it. I had a one-track mind. All my internships were one way, everything was one way, whatever. And I now work for a marketing agency. And my fashion education
also works for a marketing agency, aside from like a big business.
But I have learned a lot in the fashion industry, and it was all part of my brand story, right? So I don't know if someone would have told me to go work in a different area. People have actually told me that, and I've always been like, yeah, whatever, kind of to a certain degree. But now that I am working at an agency, I actually can tell you through multiple other different circumstances that which we'll actually talk to help Apoorva. I have learned so much more in these past 3 months than I think I have in years. Like it from being pushed with the right people or like even thinking in different ways. I've seen myself literally on a week-to-week basis bringing what I learn back to my retail fashion business, which you wouldn't expect because you would think that like my story was building on each other. But this has been a whole new different kind of enlightening experience, which has taught me more to bring back to my ultimate story.
Yeah. I think like, you know, something I've learned over a year and from like talking to you and people like you and other friends, there's going to be a multitude of people influencing, right? Like we put so much pressure on Apoorva, you need to get a master's in like a fancy school. For that, you need to make sure that you work in a big brand or, you know, something that's exciting so that you're a better sell in the application process. But I also feel like sometimes kind of thinking through those things just ruins that whole process of decision making, which is firsthand experience. I'm doing that. I'm consulting too many people and I am factoring everybody's decision without thinking about me. Like internally, I think I know, Rhea knows what the answer is. I think I may have subtly hinted it to her before that I want to go a certain way. But like I'm 24, you know, does it really matter what step I take in the long run? Because every opportunity is going to help in some way. You know, if it doesn't, and this is something one of my mentors told me in the past, if you hate your first job or your second job, which I did, it's a good step because you're not getting closer to what you want for sure, but you're able to eliminate what you do not want to do, at least, right?
I also actually, I think we talked about this last time when we were organically talking, and something we talked about was like, either decision that you make is great.
Yeah.
As long as you're prepared for your own backlash. But I will also say for all our followers, Apoorva and I had this conversation off the record, but your 20s is a very interesting time period where you're seeing a lot of people do things, and people do things at different ages. I think we were two people who are very fortunate to have had a lot of experiences in our young ages.
Yeah.
Like very crisp 20s. And I don't know about you, Apoorva, but I see myself sometimes comparing myself to people who are doing more maybe fun things than me at this age. And I get jealous. But if I actually take a step back and think about it, I've done every single one of those things, whether it was traveling to a new country or doing this or doing that, when I was like 21 or younger.
Yeah. No, I feel the same, like in terms of experiencing, right? Like I understand there are a lot of kids who come out of college at 21 who are craving for those experiences because their college life was, for the lack of a better word, different to our college experience, which again, we have to establish here that we were fortunate to be given that platform. But also I think as being part, and this is something that again is another train of thought, guys, bear with me as we're running past this episode, but when you're in an Indian household, we've spoken about it in our mental health month where all of our guests said there's a lot of pressure that comes with being in a South Asian family. It's more performance based in our houses, no matter how supportive our parents are. It's my brother, sorry. Speaking about supporting siblings, I want to know what decision I made.
Oh.
No, but I was just going to say there's so much pressure in general. I don't know what the right word is, like unconsciously, I guess. They're just like, for me, it's almost like I love my parents, but they're just like, so, don't even work if you don't want to, like focus on grad school, get the score for grad school. And they mean well, but they also are influenced by a lot of external factors. They always, I think Indian parents go off of this foundation of you need to have a second option, a backup plan that is stable. Stability is key for our families because it makes sense. South Asian families have worked really hard to establish themselves and break open from their shackles of the past. But for us now, it's like right now, as I think through this, I'm just like, there's already so much pressure unconsciously, whether I like it or not, about what my future is going to entail. Why not, despite my fun that I've had in college, also factor in a little bit of fun in general in my life? Because we are already pushing ourselves as machines, as products of South Asian families,
Yeah. I will also go back to what I said real quick, because I want to say that one of the reasons we talked about it was because like it was to acknowledge that we're all at different places in different parts of life. So Apoorva and I, had certain experiences in college, but someone else listening could have had the complete opposite. But this should help you make the decision to give yourself whatever experiences you want. But going back to what you were saying now, that's completely valid right now. Like you don't want to also take yourself away from an experience just because you've already had it. And something I struggle with all the time too. So I definitely understand that.
Yeah, it's we've spoken about little things in Rhea's episode about how she's negotiated, how she's kind of gone through that whole decision-making process of pros and cons. And when I say I did it, I've done it. So like, we don't want to go over that again, because those things are something you should be doing when you have multiple options. Think through things and do your pros and cons and negotiate whatever you want to negotiate. And I can speak for this. Negotiating in India, a lot of my friends, Rhea, actually, this is funny, in India, after they listened to your episode, were like, is negotiating possible in India? So I, guys, like literally took this upon myself, because again, I have the luxury to negotiate because I'm at a position where I have 2 or 3 jobs. So I took Rhea's advice and I went in and I said, hello, like, let's get down and dirty to negotiation. Like, this is going to be fun. So my dad and I sat down until 2 a.m., looked at the entire offer and like started tweaking things as to where we think I would need money. If I was moving to a new city, hell, I need transportation allowance. I need relocation. I need X, Y, and Z, just the basic elements of moving to a new city I need. And for all the people who think negotiation is not possible in India, I'm not saying I have like a fabulous offer. I'm not saying they met me halfway. They did not. But you can, because if it means that they'll increase your salary by 10K, 20K, 30K, that's a win. And you have to always negotiate when you are moving jobs, because it is only setting you up for success in the future. Especially as a woman, we're not
You're
given. You're
also cutting yourself short. Whatever she's saying about negotiation, but she did negotiate with one of the other positions to meet her with what one of the first jobs was offering.
Yeah.
Which is like pretty big.
Pretty big. For a remote position, the fact that they said we want to do it, I'm only talking about like the non-remote job where, I said they may not meet me halfway, but this other job is okay, the remote position to try and match. Yeah. So I think, again, like you can't negotiate right out of college. That's tough. It's your first job. But when you start gaining,
I did try.
There's a start, like If I, for example, was in Hyderabad, which is the city I currently live in, and I got a job right after college, I would probably not negotiate all that much if the job was right in Hyderabad, because you won't get any perks, right? Like, but if I was moving from Hyderabad to Bangalore, Hyderabad to Mumbai, then I could try and negotiate at least a relocation. But essentially, what I want to boil this down to is, when you're in a position in your career, when you've got 1 or 2 years of experience, negotiation is possible. And we are reiterating this all over again in this episode, because it opens up more confusion for the candidate if the interviewers are willing to negotiate to your demands, but it is a good confidence booster. But going back to my decision, I still have no idea.
Well, I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Is leadership a thought-provoking discussion when you're trying to make your decision?
Yeah. Yes. We've spoken about this off the record, but like on the record, it's something I value. We both value in our jobs, right? Like, it's really hard to gauge the person you're interviewing with. Actually, out of the 5 interviews I had gotten, one of them was an 8-round interview. And I was just like, what the heck is going on? Like, I'm not even prepared for this. And through every interview process I went through with them, even though it was long, I was able to get an understanding of the culture, right? Like, each of them was like, oh, so you got to have an analytical brain. And they were digging deeper, and they were like really into knowing what I have to bring to the table as opposed to my personality, which made me think, okay, this job is very technical. The team is very strategic. They need someone with X, Y, and Z skill sets, which I may or may not have. So it's very revealing 2 ways. 1, because you understand the culture and the team that you may have to work with. And 2, it reveals things about you, because you're just like, okay, maybe I'm lacking here. So maybe this is not a right job. I think really through this episode, what I want to say is I'm at a point where and Rhea can attest to this. I've worked for these kind of marketing brand jobs right from the start. Like, previously, both my jobs were very much unrelated. They were different. And this is a job I would have wanted when I got out of college. But I'm here now, and they're both aligned to my interests. It's just about making that step. And I don't know what that step is. I think it's a bit of a path where I have to consider my personality, consider what is being brought to the table. And I hate to say it, sometimes in a country like India, especially, sometimes brand matters. So yeah, that's, I think, like a takeaway for me then. Yeah.
I'm going to do a quick roundup of 3 takeaways before we wish you good luck on this decision within the next 5 hours. I think the first thing I really heard was considering what you think your next 2 to 3 years are going to be. So where are you going to be, and how can each position, if you're in a situation like this, help you to attain that? The second one I heard was that what does your life and your experiences kind of account for? What do you ultimately want? And how does each job, location, salary, whatever it is, contribute to that within that kind of 2-year plan? I think I heard 2 more. One was making sure you analyze your leaders or the team when you're interviewing, and how that makes you feel, and what you really want to be in. I think that you said it very kind of quickly, but I definitely picked up on that. And honestly, the 4th was, if you're in India, you have to get a master's.
Yeah. I walked in saying I'm going to defy this, and I pushed it by 2 years. And it's just something, I think, for me, the only 2 other takeaways I have to add, we've got 4 already. And for someone listening to this from a foreign culture, if you're probably rattled by what the fuck, why are kids planning so much ahead of time?
That could just be us.
Yeah. That could just be us, but it's also how your culture and your country shapes your thinking. Like if I was in the US, I'd probably take a little more of a relaxed approach. If I was in if I was in Europe, I'd just be like, I'm just gonna take a gap year and work at a cafe and translate that into transferable skills. Because if there's a country that values anything beyond a corporate job, that's Europe. And if I was in Japan, like I'd have to work even harder to gain their trust, because the culture in Japan is very different. So factor in the culture that you're going into. That second is, you know, again, like Rhea and I share our experiences, not to brag, but to help. And if there's anything that you have to take away from this, is not to be envious of our whatever jobs or whatever that we have on hand, but the fact that we fucking bust our asses off and put in the work, like network, work. Like we never had a job immediately. We had to bust our butt to work the network, and then at the right time, you get the job. So yeah,
there's a lot of tears and consultations between each other and comparison to other people.
So much wine too.
So I hope that nobody feels discouraged through this, but only encouraged, because if anything was supposed to come from this is that we relate to that lull that you're in, we relate to the painful moments, and there are good things that happen at the end of those painful moments. Yeah. And this is a great
life
example.
After 21.
Yeah. Well, Apoorva, we look forward to hearing what your decision is, but we will save that for next time. So tune into our next episode to hear what Apoorva decides.
Thank you, everybody. Happy adulting.